Hey there, friends. I'm Nick Warren. I'm back with Matt Goddard. And you did just say to me we should label this talk Two Old Gits Talk About AI. But but I think we've got an interesting perspective here because we were young when the last real technological sort of tidal wave came through, which was, of course, I mean, the internet, but specifically the World Wide Web, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I, in particular, and you to some extent, rode that wave.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
because because we were young, we were kind of, I suppose, somewhat insulated from the broader effects because we were in that industry. We were insulated from the broader effects of what that meant for people who weren't young or weren't web savvy or weren't able to retrain or to develop new skills. Whereas now,
I
I won't say we're right at the other end of our careers, but
no, but what you're saying is interesting. It's interesting to the extent that I've just recently hired a lad, 26, and I said to him that AI is going to be massive impact for us. Either it's going to improve our efficiencies massively, or it's going to start nibbling at our heels of the traditional work that we do, and we need to get on top of it, and we need to find out what's going on.
yeah,
And because I'm a lot older, I need you to have the unbridled enthusiasm of youth to tell me what it is that I'm not getting. Because I tell you why. Now, I think a lot of what I'm seeing AI do is like magic.
hmm
It's like we're in the world of Harry Potter, and I'm there for that. But when I sit down to use it for things, especially coding related things, I sit down and use it, and I think to myself, well, I know how to code. Why would I tell it to guess at doing the things that I can sit down and tell it to do? Do you know what I mean? Like I
mm,
say, create this interface to do X, Y, Z in the prompt, and then it will come up with what it thinks is correct. In my experience, it's about 60 to 80% correct.
yeah.
But if I was to sit down and write that program myself, it would be 100% correct because it would be exactly what I was thinking. And I would be responsible for all of the security and all that sort of stuff. But the point is that what I recognize, and I recognize this from exactly as you say, when we rode the wave of the internet, I remember clearly people who were then my age
Yeah.
saying, what's the point of this? I don't understand. For many, many years, we were in a world where the internet was an adjunct or an addition to somebody's business offering, not their business. And then somewhere in the last 10, 15 years, it became the only way to do business, essentially.
Yeah.
And, and like, I recognize the reason I jokingly said about two old gits talk about AI is because I recognize that as much as I can appreciate the amazingness that is the AI tools that are available to me, and they do feel genuinely like wonder.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, I realize that I sometimes don't get it. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, this is the essence of disruption, right? It's Clay Christensen's brilliant idea about how industries get disrupted. And one of the things
Yeah,
that happens with the particular industry that is being disrupted is they look at the thing that's coming up and say, well, that's not good enough. That's not as good as what we
yeah,
do. And certainly, it's true. It was true in the web wave,
yeah,
whereby, shopping online was often in the early days, people were worried that it was insecure. It didn't make sense. You
yeah.
couldn't get all the stuff you could get in the store. There was no description to the eye, all that kind of stuff. It
Yeah.
wasn't as good. But the whole point of disruption is that on a certain level, it's better than what the audience could get
Yeah.
without it. And so take me as an
Yeah.
example. I haven't coded anything for decades really, but recently I was spinning up a Hugo site and I used Claude to tell me what to do. And when I wanted to change the template, I just asked it and I nudged it. And yeah, it would be much better if I could just code it theoretically, but actually the disruptive power
Oh,
of that engine, that LLM, to help me to code something that I would never have been able to attempt is right there. And of
this is,
course, what we know from
yeah.
disruption is it just gets better and better. And
Yeah.
in the end, it can swallow a lot of stuff, right?
You're absolutely right. and I'm not in any way dismissing that. And so, right, what I want to do is I want to set out my stall, right?
Go
I
for
am
it.
not an AI techno bro. I am not. I don't believe that AI is the answer to every question. But I am absolutely certain it is that disruptive force in our industry. And I'm absolutely certain that more than anything that I think I've experienced in my lifetime, this is going to fundamentally change the way that we work and the way that businesses operate. I'm absolutely certain of that. And I'm not saying that lightly in so much as, I'm a vibe programmer bro that is wanting to make millions of dollars just by, spending a weekend creating a SaaS product. It's nothing like that.
Mm.
But I've noticed in the last 6 months, very specifically in the last 6 months, AI tools have gone from being something that people have been secretly using in order to improve their lot to actually being an overtly talked about companion to delivering their work.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's when you start seeing shifts like that, that's when you start to realize that actually this is becoming an essential tool. It's like the word processor or the spreadsheet, what became an essential tool
Yeah.
in the modern office. Like AI now is becoming that tool where, I don't even need to load up Excel anymore to be able to give it a spreadsheet and say, can you give me the total number of people that had, come from America in our customer data set, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
And actually that natural language interface now has become much more intuitive than I thought it was going to at first. Do you know what it reminds me of? Do you remember in the early days of Twitter,
Mm-hmm.
and when you put in a prompt, they had "is" as the prompt word, and then say
Oh,
like Matthew
yeah.
Goddard is eating lunch, or
Yes.
Matthew Goddard is visiting his family, or whatever. And
Yeah.
so everyone used to write tweets like that, didn't they?
Yeah.
Then they were like status updates.
Yeah.
And then they got rid of the prompt, and suddenly it became, like a platform for conversation, didn't it, rather
Yeah.
than status updates?
Yeah.
And I feel
Wow. That
like
was a while
natural
ago.
language yeah, I feel like natural language processing with AI chatbots has become like that to me.
Mm.
Like beforehand, it was like very simple knowledge-based questions that were around, like how old is Judi Dench? And now it's questions like, well, for me at the very least, it's like, I don't know, I want to create a willow hurdle. How many staves do I need? How many pieces of willow do I need to weave in there? And I can
Yeah.
give it dimensions, and it will give me which I believe to be its best guess at what I need. I mean, I've never done it, so, but do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting. I think what you're describing is how we've got comfortable using LLMs as search engines effectively. So, if you want to know how old Judi Dench is, you can ask it.
Yeah,
But what I think the other thing that's really changing is that we're going from one question at a time to much more threaded work. I mean, you and I have talked before offline about, services like Make or Gumloop, where
yeah,
you are combining AI with automation and able to do extraordinarily complex kind of
yeah,
systems. So, I mean, I'm in content, and content is perhaps a little bit ahead of where AI is in coding, although I think it's catching up. But obviously for content, we can use AI, and people are, to create
yeah,
extraordinary volumes of work. You can question whether kind of everything looks like an average of everything else. And I think that's definitely
yeah.
true. So, in
I think,
content, there are certainly some conversations about how you can
yeah.
use these tools, but also not lose your voice.
Do you know? I think I think that's a really interesting point, and I think it's also an interesting point about vibe programmers as well. Now, I'm not denigrating vibe programmers in this regard, and I think that I probably am not denigrating marketing people who use solely generated AI content for
Mm-hmm.
their stuff. But what I will say is that this feels true to me, Nick. You have to keep me honest on this, but this feels true to me, right? When a new piece of technology like this comes across, happens. What you get is you get a whole bunch of people who jump on the bandwagon and are like, this is how you make $1 million in a year. Use this tool,
Yeah.
get it to
For 10
produce this
minutes.
content, get it to write this, whatever it is, get it to write this code. You'll have a SaaS product. You can sell the SaaS product. You'll have these articles, which you can then, for your marketing and stuff like that. So you almost get this first wave of early adopters who are like, let's use this as a get rich quick scheme.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone's seeing right at the moment. Like when you talk to your programmer friends, they're like, oh yeah, but these white programmers know nothing about security and all that sort of stuff. And they talk about stuff for them, for as seasoned professionals, they talk about stuff for them, which is incredibly important, right?
Yeah.
As a professional programmer, you cannot deliver code which has got, I don't know, vulnerabilities in it or what have you.
Yeah.
You have to understand what you're doing. And the same with writing. If you want to be effective at marketing or building relationships, then your writing has to have a voice. It has to tell a story. Has to be. I don't need to say this to you.
Yeah.
Mr. King of Stories mean business, but so what you get. So what I'm seeing a lot of at the moment, which is interesting, is that you get all these tools and the people that are using them are being dismissed in absolutely that disruption curve. They've been dismissed by people because they're saying, yes, but they're not doing it properly. Like 10 years ago, no, longer than 10 years ago, this shows you how old I'm getting. When you used to hand code HTML, right, all of the HTML developers that used to by hand used to sneer at people that used Front Page or Dreamweaver to create interfaces because they said, well, that code is not efficient, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know what I learned over the years is that doesn't matter. Right. On the most part, it doesn't matter. It matters now because the code that these people are creating, for example, may contain vulnerabilities and you do not have the knowledge to know whether they do or not. And that's the problem. But actually, what I've also seen, about 3 or 4 months ago, I wanted to really understand, like, what is the point of this? Right? I really wanted to immerse myself in this AI bro world and see what on earth was, why was this so interesting?
Yeah.
And I followed a few guys and who were programming. And do you know what I saw? I saw over the progress of their videos, they were learning more and more about the things they needed, the deeper things they needed to understand in order to deliver secure code and robust code and accessible code. Right. So I saw them going from, like, oh, isn't this great? This AI will produce all of my stuff for me. I don't need to worry about anything. I can make £10,000 a day or whatever, to being more and more considered as they went along. And and I believe you see that trend everywhere with adoption of new technology. You'll see people that use it on the face value bit, and then they get in deeper and they get in deeper and they start doing better work. And that's the threat in this disruption curve, right? Because all of the developers that are sat down at the moment saying, or I'm just saying developers for a moment because that's most salient to me. But I think I see the same with UX. I'll come on to that in just a second. But the thing with the developers is that they're saying, but it's not as good as me. It's not as good as me. And then to their point where suddenly it will be. But do you know what will happen is that those people that learn how to use those tools to produce code that is as good as the developer that isn't learning those tools, they will suddenly be the kings of the development space because they've learned how to curate the tools to get better productivity and to get better output. And the people that are sat there currently that are not doing this at all are the ones that are going to miss out. And that change is not going to happen in 5 years' time. That change is not going to happen in 2 years' time. That change is going to happen in months. There's change.
It's happening right now, isn't it? I think I said this to you before. The best quote I saw on AI, and I can't remember who said it, is that AI is not going to take your job, but someone using AI is going to take your job. And I very much took that to heart. I mean, one of the lessons I guess I learned, because I was building a business in 1997 when the web took off and I rode that wave, is that we dismiss things at our peril. So it's easy to say, okay, well, you've used AI to create 10 blog posts or whatever.
Yeah.
And maybe they all have that kind of slightly AI feel. They're the average of what's out there on the internet about this topic. It's, you can always, this is the danger. We look at it and we say, yeah, but it's not as good as what I can write by hand. And
Yeah.
that is true, but it also, it forgets that they will get better and better and better. And if you look at something like, the newer models of ChatGPT, if you look at Claude, they are all getting better at writing. Writing
Yeah.
is, and it's a bit like, you mentioned about spreadsheets and stuff, but, I can remember starting to use word processors. Obviously I grew up in the 80s with like ZX Spectrums and what have you. And then you got onto, slightly bigger computers, IBM PCs with spreadsheets and word processors. And there were writers then who said, oh no, I'm never going to, I'll write by hand. And that's fine if you want to do it, but you shouldn't expect to still be around, because someone with a word processor is going to come along and take your work. And the same, of course, is true for now. And I just think I go back to what I was going to say at the start, which is back then when we were riding that wave, we didn't have the perspective that we have now, because I think you said to me that someone had estimated that it's going to be 66% less development or developers needed. I can't remember the exact number, but now you run a development agency. I've obviously run teams and what have you, and that 66%, which might have been theoretical for the web for us because we were young, has now got a human face. And I think one of our jobs is to make sure that the young people we're working with, everyone really we care about, understands that need to go out and to start learning these tools and technology. Because I tell you what, here's the thing, right? AI makes a load of stuff easy that wasn't easy before. If you want to write 100 blog posts, you can do it in 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
But it's also making it easy for everyone else. And what's always been true is the people who are successful are the people who do the things that aren't easy. So yeah, we're going to get buried under a billion bits of content, as if we weren't already, but a billion bits of AI generated content. And there's going to be loads of people doing the easy version of that. We also have to ask ourselves, where's the edge? Where are we pushing towards? Because doing the hard stuff, and in my case, for example, we were talking about this before we started recording, but potentially working with a client who perhaps even 2 years ago would have needed a big content team to manage this big rollout that they're looking at doing. Now actually using AI and automation to say, how can we really ramp up? Because the flip side of, I'll stop talking in a minute. The flip side of we need 66% less developers or whatever it might be, 66% less content writers. Well, you can say that, or you can say that it allows us to be that much more productive with our time, but we have to learn the tools, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was talking to a colleague of mine the other day, and we were talking. So the story is that we are doing a pitch to some financial services companies. We're looking at the gaps in their AI strategy, essentially. So we are saying that at the moment, everyone is looking at customer-facing tools, stuff that you can give people to improve their financial literacy and all that sort of stuff. But actually, the one area that everyone overlooks is their internal tooling. So how do you use AI to make people more productive, to make, to give them the tools they need to make smarter, better decisions, unified knowledge base, that kind of stuff. And that whole internal tooling thing has been true for the last at least 20 years of my career, because that's the tools that we focus on, and no one ever spends money in that area. But when they do, they do. But what was interesting to me in that conversation I was having, it's just exactly what you were saying there. There are two things that I see, two trends that I see that is interesting. The first is that we will become, when everyone has got access to the same LLMs, and like ChatGPT and Claude have their different strengths, but do you know what? Actually, they're about as good as each other, right? There is not much difference between those tools. There's not much difference between any of the large LLMs, really, from a practical day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And it's an arms
From
race
people
anyway,
using
isn't
them.
it? So they're always
Yeah,
leapfrogging each other.
they're always going to come up. Now, the thing is, if everybody's got access to the same tools, if everyone's got access to PhD level writers, software developers, whatever it is, then your competitive advantage is not going to be the LLM. It's going to be the way that you use it. It's going to be the way that you integrate your domain knowledge, your processes, your skills, and your expertise to get something better out of that LLM. And I think that what that means for most people is that your value is going to come about your tools and your way of using the LLM, your knowledge base that you've got in your own retrieval augmented generation system, whatever it is, where you can keep pulling all of that domain knowledge into your craft. Now, unfortunately, what that means typically is the people that can build, if you start right now, the people that can build the best knowledge bases are the people with the most experience.
Yeah.
Which means that if you are a senior developer, a senior UX designer, senior product manager, whatever, you are much more able now to become a curator of those tools than you are if you were a junior developer. Now, there is clearly an obvious issue here. Clearly an obvious issue. Now, AI will continue to grow and become more capable. And at some point, it may be as capable to be its own orchestrator than have people do it, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one eventuality. The other eventuality is we still need people to orchestrate the AI tools, the agents and the LLMs that we're using. But what that means is there is no career path for junior developers or designers or product managers, that career path to get them to the point where they can curate those tools don't exist. And I was thinking about this the other day. My uncle is a plumber and he is a very good plumber, got a very good reputation. He's been working for years and years and years, and he's decided to retire this year to my aunt's delight. And he is choosing not to hand his business over to anyone, actually. But in the old days, if he had done it another way, in the more traditional way, then what he would have done is have an apprentice or somebody coming up behind him,
Yeah.
and he would hand over the tools of his successful business to that person so that they can continue to
Yeah.
work and to have the skills and capabilities that they need to. Now, clearly there's an argument to say that actually if I have created this whole tool set, then I can create something to manage my own tool sets, and then I can, retire or leave, but then virtual Matt could still be working for me.
Mm-hmm.
But if that isn't true, then are we looking at a more of a guild type scenario? Do you know what I mean? I'm just sort of thinking, are we looking at a place where individuals will bring on their own apprentices to take over their AI, to be to be the custodians of those processes and those systems moving forward? I don't know. I think it sounds like I quite like the idea of that. But I don't know. I find, because I'm older, and back to your point, when I can see the impact of these tools on people, yes, I want them to learn them because I want them to be ahead of the game right now.
Yeah.
But I can also see that for, my friend teaches in a college, he teaches software development in a college. I can also see it's going to be very, very difficult for those people to learn and to work in software development in the traditional way they did before. Now, they might become vibe programmers who are, like doing their unicorns of one person, making billions of pounds worth of money on, creating software and stuff for people.
Mm.
But it doesn't seem to be, that seems like an unfriendly future to me, does it? I just don't know. I mean, these aren't complete thoughts, because these are the things that are going through my mind about the potential impact of these technologies on people. And I worry that we're not creating an environment where people can learn from other people, and it becomes just this isolationist situation. But, you know, it's interesting. I
I
don't know
think,
if you've got any thoughts on that.
well, I think people who want to learn will be able to learn now better than they've ever been able to learn before, because it's like when I'm putting together this website where I don't really know what I'm doing, but I can ask questions, I can get it to clarify things. And in every sense, really, for that project, the LLM I was using was acting as a teacher in the best way, because it was solely focused on answering the questions I had. So I think the technology opens up extraordinary opportunities for everyone. What we will find, as we always find, I think, is that the people who will benefit from that opportunity are the people who are better at self-starting. If everyone's doing the easy thing, it stops being extraordinary and just starts becoming,
No.
a baseline, right? And
Yeah.
when we want to build a business or build a career or whatever, we have to be prepared to do more than everyone else, or, to get to that level which you were talking about, which is some level of expertise. So thinking about the kids you mentioned in your friend's class, they probably have a better opportunity to get farther faster than any computer programming students in the history of the world. The question is,
True.
will they? What all of this stuff does, it takes away the safety net or the safe process or that kind of steady progression, because you're working for a company that, it wants to pay next to nothing for a sort of junior programmer, and over time you'll work into being a medium and then a senior programmer. I think the world changed, and again, I'll keep going back to the web because that was very similar kind of massive disruption. And every time one of these enabling technologies comes along, the question that you have to ask is, who are the people who are going to use that enabling technology to do something that's difficult or to have creative ideas? The LLM is going to answer the question you ask it, right? Broadly speaking, they're answering the questions you ask. So the questions become ever more important, and the drive becomes ever more important. And it's not easy, but I think it's the continuation of what we've seen for the last, I don't know how we'd say, maybe since the 80s. Well, yeah, but that kind of, the stability of society is changing, and you can now break out of it in a way you never could 100 years ago. Wherever, certainly in England, in the UK, wherever you were probably stuck. You were going to stick there, and the technology opens up extraordinary opportunities.
It creates social mobility up to a point, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
I think as you were talking there, I think two things that occurred to me. One thing was, like, you and I have been talking about accelerated digital delivery for years and years and years. We started recording these podcasts, and we started talking about these. We started writing about these things properly when we started to look at it. It was in October last year. October 24, we wrote our first article where we looked at the principles of accelerated digital delivery. And in there, we said that the trust, clarity, visibility, and consistency were they're essentially the very human elements of our ability to communicate and collaborate with each other in order to become more efficient, become more accelerated in the work we're doing.
Yeah.
So by definition, when we're talking about the principles, what we're talking about was the fundamental underpinnings. Of course, there is skill on top of that, because you can have great clarity, great communication. You can be absolutely transparent, and you can have great trust within the team. But if you're not very good, you're not going to get things done very quickly.
Yeah.
Right. Now, what I'm thinking, so the assumption that I've made in this accelerated digital delivery world that we've been talking about, is that teams of people will be coming together to deliver the outcome, whatever that is. It might be a software product. It could be anything. Accelerated delivery, the principles are the same, whether you are a content team, software development team, or whether you are an internal HR team who need to work effectively together. I don't really think that their fundamental principles change.
Yeah.
But what's changed since October last year, when we first started talking about this, is that your ability to deliver work is now not dependent necessarily on a team of people, but is dependent on you and an LLM to work together to deliver that work that you need to do. Now, there are still some fundamental principles to that. Even with the LLM, you still need trust. You need trust that the outcome that you've got is true. It's not hallucinating to you.
Yeah.
Visibility, especially with the reasoning models about how it comes to the outcome that it wants. Consistency actually is a real problem with LLMs, because you can ask it the same prompt
Yeah.
and you'll get multiple different things each time, which is frustrating. And that's a real barrier to accelerated delivery with the LLMs. And clarity is important, because if you are not very good at writing prompts, then you may not get for example, you can say to an LLM, this is what I want, but please ask me any clarifying questions. And it will then help you to make that prompt. But then, so you've got these principles as they apply to you working with the LLM.
Yeah.
But actually, you are still part of a broader team of people. So how do you make sure that the output that comes out of that, the document that comes out of it, or the code that comes out of it, or the HR process that comes out, whatever it is, I don't know, whatever it might be, whatever comes out of it, you're still going to have a handover process. You're still going to have some process whereby it has to move down the delivery chain, right?
Yeah.
So, there's still these opportunities, I suppose, to create. It's the tooling around the chain, the handovers, the processes, which are less obvious to me at the moment. I mean, yes, we've got automation. You can look at tools like Make that would do automation of workflows and stuff like that. But that still seems to me like an area of interest at the moment. How you support that flow of work. Because these things aren't particularly, these different tools are not, they're like all systems owned by a proprietary monopoly like OpenAI or Claude or whatever it is. They are interested in keeping people within their ecosystem, right? Which means that quite often those systems don't work independently of each other. And we see this currently, right? If I want to use AI to connect to my HR MIS system, then, there at the moment, there's this new thing called MCP, which is especially a unified, a standardized way of being able to connect into APIs and, the systems. That's brand new. That's only been out in the last sort of 3 or 4 months. It's not, or at least popularized in the last 3 or 4 months. But actually getting an LLM to access an API to get data from those systems is not very easy at the moment it's starting to happen through agentic design. But so I think process flow is interesting. I think the other thing is, what we've got to remember is that all of this code that we are getting these systems to write for us are being managed by a LLM, which is owned by OpenAI or Anthropic or whoever it is, right?
Yeah.
When they retrain their AIs, the way that their work is produced will change. It does. Also, the truth is that if they are now responsible for the means of your labor, then they could then decide to increase, to say, I said this to someone else the other day. I don't know whether I read it on April Fool's Day or whatever, but I can see this happening, right? I remember, I think, reading a press release from OpenAI where they said that you could hire a PhD level software development agent from them for $30,000 a year. And that would be equivalent to, I don't know, 5 software developers or something like that.
Wow. Okay.
So, like that from a cost perspective, hiring 3 PhD level software developers, just in quotes, 3 PhD level software developers for $30,000. Well, seems like a no brainer to me. that's the same type of thinking that actually led to all of this work being outsourced to other countries in the last 10, 15 years, because you're always chasing for a cheaper price to get
Yeah.
the equivalent stuff. But then in the past, you were able to go out to contractors, to multiple development companies,
Yeah. Yeah.
you had resilience in the system that meant that actually there were market forces to keep the price down. If everyone's using OpenAI's PhD level software developers, and then they decide, well, actually, you know what? That's now going to be $60,000 a year,
Yeah.
$160,000.
Yeah.
You are saving a lot of money by using our tool.
Yeah.
So actually, and then suddenly you lose your ability to
Yeah.
be competitive in your landscape.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
this is one of the things that interests me very much at the moment is, what are the open source LLM models like Llama and others that you could use to start building as your base to build your internal capabilities and systems? So you're not just creating the tools that OpenAI give you or Anthropic give you. Can you start to create the tool that is you don't have to train the LLM per se,
Mm-hmm.
but can you start creating the tool set that is around your
process.
AI, your process, and then
Yeah.
you're not. And I would think for big companies, it makes sense for them to be thinking about that model than by wedding themselves to OpenAI stuff. It's another, sorry, just last thought, because do you know what this reminds me of? Do you remember when Waterstones first had its first e-commerce store? Do you know where it hosted it?
No, I don't. I remember the store, but
Amazon.
did it?
Waterstones
Yeah.
sold their books through Amazon because Amazon went to them and said, we've got this great e-commerce platform that will allow you to sell your books to people via the
Yeah.
internet. And they were like, somebody made a really smart decision. They said, yeah, you know what? The cost of us hosting it on Amazon's website is way cheaper compared to us building our own. And this was before BookTok came along, and then bookstores have just, they've gone through the roof now.
Yeah.
Like people, they're making loads of money. This was when bookstores were dying because of
Disappearing.
Amazon.
Yeah.
And so suddenly for years they were using Amazon's website, and suddenly Amazon was the be all and end all for buying books, for buying things online. And what did that mean for Waterstone's business?
Yeah.
And I feel like there's that same risk.
You have to. Yeah.
For some companies.
We need to be anti-fragile if we want to survive.
Yeah.
We need resilience to build resilience into the system. I think, anyone who's listened to this podcast or watched us will see that we are thinking through this stuff, and we don't have the answers yet. What I would say to anyone who hasn't already started to immerse themselves in this technology is that is the way forward. You need to see, even when it's not good, even when it's not as good as you are, you need to start to see. I'll remember one example. I spun up a Docker thing the other week to look at Claude computer use.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
It's just extraordinary. And what you're doing there, in case people haven't tried it, is you're effectively opening up a little virtual computer inside your computer with a prompt and saying in the prompt, I want you to go to this website, grab some URLs, bring back the content so that I can edit the content. And what you then see is the website has a browser. Sorry, the virtual computer has a browser. It has, I think, Microsoft Office on it or what have you. And what you watch is the AI using this computer just like a human would use this computer, saying, okay, well, I need to do this. So first of all, I'm going to go to the website and check that I can get to it. And then I'm going to follow all the links, and then I'm going to write it to a spreadsheet. And it's definitely not perfect. But in terms of me looking at how the world is going to work soon, it would amaze me if Windows and Mac OS and what have you don't have this kind of functionality built into them in the next 2 or 3 years. What you need to do, if you haven't started already, is really immerse yourselves, because you need to be one of those people that you can do more than the thing that is just easy.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to do the easy thing. If we want to survive, if we want to thrive, if we want to build resilience, like Matt was saying, anti-fragility into our business, we need to be digging deep into these things and understanding where they are now and where they're going to go. And we need to, use it. Wayne Gretzky said, you've got to skate to where the puck's going to be.
Yeah.
This puck is moving incredibly fast.
Yeah.
And I've no doubt Matt will be talking about this again, and probably pretty soon.
I mean, also that what we've got to remember, especially for people of our generation, Nick, that there really will be that, for a lot of us, there will be that pushback about, I can do this better myself. I don't need this because I can do it. Now they're the tendencies that we need to just get rid of, right? Because this will be the way things will work. Using AI to deliver your work is the same as using electric power tools if you're a carpenter or do you know what I mean? It's very quaint if you can do it all with a hand plane and a hand drill and all that sort of stuff. But you know what? You don't get things done very quickly. And if you're a commercial, cabinet maker, then actually, plug them in, plug your tools in. And I think this is this. Yeah. And I think this is, we need to get over this is not good enough yet. It's not good enough yet, but it's never going to be worse than it is now.
Exactly. Great. Yeah. So go out and give it a try. Thanks, Matt. I say we'll be back talking about this soon, and we'll be back in the meantime talking about another aspect of accelerating digital delivery. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye now.